Hello, I hope you're doing well today. Thank you for taking the time to click on the link to watch this video. Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at an important topic, and that is pursuing health, stewarding our body for His glory. You'll see, I think, that the Bible does weigh in on this topic and has something to say, and we're going to be looking at that here in just a few minutes. And then we're going to be looking at 4 key aspects of health so we can better steward our body and be more useful for Him. I'd like to first start out with the goal of this elective, and that is to better understand our body and how to care for it so we can live more efficient and effective lives to bring Him glory. So that really is the purpose of why I'm sharing this information, and I hope it will be helpful for you, and I trust that you'll be able to take something away so you can be more effective in His service. There should be a handout attached, so please find that attached to the email, and you can print that out if you would find that helpful and follow along as we go through the lesson today. So I'd like to start out by looking at the biblical foundation of why we should be concerned about health in our bodies. What does the Bible have to say about this topic? And we're going to be looking at several different verses. First, I want to look at Psalm 139, verse 14. It says, "We are fearfully and wonderfully made." You know, the human body is amazing, but it is a gift from God. It's not ours. And the Bible goes on to talk in various passages about the physical aspect and also the spiritual aspect as well. God's created both of those. A few medical facts I thought that I would kind of start with here just to give us an idea and cause us to pause and think about how amazing the human body is. There's 78 organs in the human body, and you might ask, well, what's an organ? It's a recognizable structure that performs a specific function. It's a collection of cells and tissues. Of those 78, 5 are very essential for life. The brain, heart, liver, lungs, and kidneys. These must be functioning for life. Also, the body has over 100 trillion cells in the body. Also, the human brain has over 100 billion neurons. 100 billion. Then we think about one of the key organs I just mentioned, the heart. You know, you wake up every morning and you don't have to tell your heart to keep pumping or your lungs to breathe. It's something that happens day to day. That's something that God's built in to us. But the heart, it will beat around 100,000 times a day, pumping out over 2,000 gallons. And then each day we take over 20,000 breaths a day as well. So that's something God's all just designed to happen from birth, not something we have to consciously think about, but that is going on in the background as we accomplish our day-to-day activities. One other organ of note, the kidney, it will process about 50 gallons of blood a day as it filters out different contaminants and things from our blood. These are just a few facts that a lot of times we don't think about all these things going on in our body, but God has designed us. He's created us with amazing function, and we need to see what our role is to help care for this body that He's given us. Another verse that we can look at is in Genesis 1:27. It says, "We are created in God's image, and that we are also His image bearers." So I think we can take away from this verse and realize that we are created in God's image, and then we need to be aware that as other people look at us and look at our physical bodies, that is a reflection of Christ. Another very important passage is Romans 12:1. It's a familiar passage. "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship." You know, we are living sacrifices. We every day go about our tasks and things, but God wants us to use our bodies and be useful for Him, have practical usefulness for Him. You know, it's something to think about. If God, which He's called each one of us to a very specific task on this earth. Whether you're a teacher, or maybe a stay-at-home parent, an engineer, maybe you work in the medical field, a pilot, He's called us to quite a range of different ministries, but it would be sad if we didn't care for the body that He gave us, and then therefore inhibiting us from pursuing the tasks and the purposes that He's given to us. So that's one thing that we can think about as we go through this, that are we protecting and preserving the body that God's given us so that we can be the most useful for Him. You think about Jesus and His earthly ministry over 2,000 years ago. You know, Luke 2 talks about how Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God. So we know that He had a physical body. He ate, He had to sleep, He grew, and that's something that we know that He was fully man. He needed this healthy body to accomplish the ministry that He had on the earth. He had a specific purpose and task, ultimately leading to the cross. But during those 33 years, He had to do many physical tasks to get done when He needed to. You think about just some of the logistics from the city that He might have lived near the end of His life in Capernaum to Jerusalem, about 75 miles distance. Obviously, back then, they did not have cars or motorcycles. Well, they maybe did use horses or donkeys at time. Christ had to walk pretty much everywhere that He went. And you think about back then, it was averaged that, or estimated that people could average walking maybe 8 or 10 miles a day, maybe up to 15 miles a day. And Christ, if He hadn't taken care of His physical body, where would He be? Would He be able to put in those miles and get to where He needed to accomplish His earthly ministry? No, He wouldn't. There's also another very interesting quote. This was from a 19th century preacher, Robert Murray McCheyne. And God really used this young preacher. At the age of only 23, he led a Presbyterian congregation of over 1,000 people. But he died at the very young age of 29. And he wrote, "God gave me a message to deliver and a horse to ride. Alas, I have killed the horse, and now I cannot deliver the message." So he realized that he maybe didn't take care of his body to the fullest extent, and therefore possibly his life was cut short. Now, we don't know fully that was God's exact plan for him, but he is pointing out here that he had a message, and at only being able to live to the age of 29 is very unfortunate, because it sounds like that God used him when he was alive those short years greatly. Two other key facts that I'd like to look at is, first, the concept that our body is a temple. And this is also a very important verse when we think about taking care of our bodies and what our bodies are intended for. We see in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 6, this is Paul writing to the church at Corinth. He says in verse 19 and 20, "Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price, so glorify God in your body." Now, this passage ultimately is about fleeing sexual immorality, but we really do see this very important principle that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. As a Christian, the Holy Spirit resides in us, and it's up to us to care for our body and to make sure it's clean and ready for His use. We see that this idea also of our body being a temple, it also causes us to think about what a temple was used for. It was for worship. So it also points to the aspect that our bodies are there to aid in worshiping God. They should point others to God. I thought John MacArthur had a very good quote here as he says, "Our bodies have one supreme purpose, to glorify God." So it does make us think about, well, how can we use our bodies to glorify God? What should we be doing with them? In 1 Corinthians 4:2, it says, "Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful." So stewards, what is the idea of stewardship? What does that mean? Stewardship is utilizing and managing all the resources that God has provided for His glory and the betterment of His creation. Now, many times when we think of stewardship, we think of being good stewards of our time, maybe the talents that He's given us, even financial resources. But Do we often think about being good stewards of our physical body and the health that He has given? Probably not. So that's one of the things, and the focus is during these next 4 weeks is about how we can be better stewards of our body, how it can be more effective for the purpose of being useful for Him and glorifying Him. One last biblical principle that we do need to consider is that when it does come to our bodies and things such as exercise, nutrition, different things of taking care of our body, we need to remember this needs to be done in moderation, in the right place. In Philippians 4:5, it says, "Let your moderation be known unto all men." And then also in 1 Timothy 4:8, "For bodily training is of some value, but godliness is of value in every way." So we see that it's not saying that bodily training is of no value at all, but it does have its place. It should not get out of balance and start to shift our priorities where it wouldn't line up with where the Bible would be in agreement with. So we see that the Bible has a balanced view of our body with the right focus on its purpose. And this kind of contrasts with the view of the world. When the world thinks about the physical body, many times it's all about glorifying self, about raising self-esteem. And those are obviously not the Bible's focus and priority when we think about a Christian's goal for our body and what it is used for. So we do need to make sure that we do keep that in mind and that things are balanced and done in moderation. You've maybe seen the movie Chariots of Fire, and this is a story even I remember when I was younger and in vacation Bible school many, many years ago. There was a Scottish missionary. He was actually born to Scottish missionaries in China. His name was Eric Liddell. And he was an amazing athlete. He was so good that he actually was able to run in the Olympics. He was a runner, and he then won a gold medal. He had a record that stood for over 12 years. He had one particular race in the 1924 Paris Olympics. It was the 100-meter dash. And he was one of the heavy favorites to win this race. But unfortunately, the race was held on a Sunday. And he took the stand that because Sunday is the Lord's day, that I'm not going to run in this race and I will forfeit my position. And because of that, obviously, he didn't win. He didn't have the opportunity to run. But his priorities were right at that time because he knew that worship and a focus on glorifying God was more important than going out and running and competing in this event. Now, he was able to compete in other events during the week, and that's where he did win a gold medal in the 400-meter. But he had his priorities correct, and I think it's a good example and a good reminder to us as we go through life that we need to always be thinking about our priorities, whether it be with our time, finances, talents, but especially also when it comes to our health and this idea of keeping our body healthy and ready for service for Him. So in review, we have seen that we are God's creation. We're wonderfully made. We've seen also that we're supposed to be living sacrifices and used for Him. We've also seen that our body is a temple. It's the dwelling place of the Holy Spirit, and that God has entrusted us with a physical body, and we must care for it so we can be useful for Him. We need to also keep in mind the principle of moderation, and that ultimately all that we do is for His glory. So we've looked at these biblical principles of these verses that's helping to guide us when we look at regarding our physical body. Now I'd like to go ahead and move into our topic for the rest of our time today. And the topics we'll be covering over the next 4 weeks include exercise, which is what we'll be covering for the remainder of our time today. Also nutrition, which we'll cover next week. Then we'll look at stress and how we should be managing stress. And then also the idea of sleep and why that's important for our health as well. I'd like to take just a moment also to reference one resource that I found very helpful. It's called Fit for the Master. This is actually written by a local Christian pastor. His name is John Lehman. I had the privilege of knowing him back in high school and college, even was able to run and train with him. But he's written an excellent book here about taking care of our bodies, how to be useful for God's service. And it's obviously written from a Christian perspective. So I would definitely recommend that book if you would like to read further about some of these things that we're going to be discussing. Obviously, time will limit how in depth we can go with some of these topics, but that is a great resource that's available on Amazon as well. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, let's go ahead and move into our first topic for today, and that is of exercise and how that is very important for maintaining our physical health. I don't know what you think of when you think of exercise. Maybe you think of the Olympic Games and men and women sprinting down the track. Maybe you think of people at the gym lifting weights. Maybe for you it's going out for a walk on the beach, playing golf. There's many different forms of exercise, and most forms of exercise are good and useful. To give a definition of exercise and what that actually means, it is physical activity that is planned, structured, and repetitive for the purpose of conditioning any part of the body used to improve health and maintain fitness. So we see that it's something that's planned and structured. It's not haphazard, and there's a purpose to it to improve health and to maintain fitness. I came across this quote as actually from a exercise magazine back in 1922, but I thought it was very appropriate, and it's definitely stood the test of time. It says, "There can be no real health without exercise." So exercise, as we're going to see, is a very important part of staying healthy. The WHO, it describes health, because I think that's going to be important to look at when we look at our physical body and staying healthy. What does that actually mean from a medical standpoint and even maybe from a biblical standpoint? So the WHO defined health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So many times we think of health as just, I'm not sick, I'm feeling well, but it kind of adds this extra layer of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. I think John Layman, in the book that I just referenced, he even kind of put more of a appropriate biblical definition on it, and he talks about health is where you're able to have a body that enables you to more easily and practically glorify God. So I think that more summarizes from a biblical standpoint what health is, because why were we created in the first place? Why were we given a body? Well, ultimately it is to use that body for His service and to be able to glorify Him. And so health is having a body that enables us to fully do that in a way that He's created us to. So let's look at a few things when we think about exercise then. One of the most important things we can do for our health overall is regular physical activity. And I can say that because there have been literally thousands of articles that have looked at exercise and the benefits are many. And we're going to actually look at some of those here in a few minutes. God made us to move. He gave us legs, arms. He wanted us to be moving and functioning even from a young age. A young child is learning to walk and stand, and children running and playing. So God has definitely given us the ability, and He wants us to be moving. As I've mentioned, many articles in the medical literature that do support exercise and the benefits that are found in exercise. We're going to see, though, that exercise can take some work. You have to have a plan when it comes to exercise. Many times exercise doesn't just happen. Yes, we will get some exercise during the day as you go about your normal tasks at home or at work or at church where you are walking and doing things. But overall, there does need to be a plan involved. There needs to be a time commitment there as well. One other thing to mention is that if you're new to exercise or maybe haven't exercised in quite a while, do realize that maybe you should consult with your medical professional, a physician that might need to look at things like your heart, blood pressure, and other aspects of your health to make sure that whatever you're going to be setting out to do is appropriate for you and that that's going to be something healthy for you to undertake. Some general guidelines now as we look at exercise and things that you can think about as you try to structure a potential exercise program. Maybe you're already doing something and that's great. And maybe some of the things we'll cover here you'll learn how to be more effective with your exercise. Maybe you haven't been exercising very much in the last number of months. Maybe with the pandemic going on, you've become a little slack or lazy. Maybe your gym's closed, and this is a time to reset. Let's look at some guidelines and things to keep in mind as you try to have an exercise plan and look at what some of the literature and important organizations, medical organizations, say is a good pattern to follow. So first, how much should you be exercising? In general, it's agreed upon that 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise and activity is a very good goal. So this should be at least 10-minute segments, but maybe more ideally 30 minutes. So if you do the math, 30 minutes a day times 5 days a week would get you to 150 minutes a week. So that would be a very good goal. Maybe you're not able to reach that goal every week, but that would be something that you would want to shoot for. Now it does say moderate physical activity. It should be moderately intense. So how would we define that? A good way of calculating the intensity of your activity could be your heart rate. And you've probably maybe heard this calculation before. You can take 220, subtract your age, and that will give you pretty much your max heart rate, 100%, which is not where you should be exercising at. So let's do a quick problem here to kind of give you an idea of how this would work out. So let's take a 40-year-old individual. So if you take 220 minus 40, that brings you down to 180 beats per minute, because we're talking about heart rate. So 180 would be really the max heart rate. But moderate physical activity should be more in the range of 50 to 70% of your maximal heart rate. So for this 40-year-old individual, the heart rate in the range of maybe 90 up to 126 beats a minute would be considered moderate physical activity. So that would be a good goal for those 150 minutes to ideally try to have your heart rate somewhere in that range. It's amazing that we live in a culture and age now where technology can really aid us in many of these endeavors as we seek to be healthy. There are watches and different apps out there, so that's one way. If you have a smartwatch, that might be a good tool to use as you exercise. You can keep track of your heart rate and see if it's staying in that 50 to 70 percentage range there. So you're not underperforming, but you're also not stressing your heart too much during your exercise periods. Obviously, there's different types of exercises as well that we can consider. Aerobic exercise, which is more focused on your heart and the heartbeat and your breathing, keeping your heart strong. There's also strength training exercise, which also can be very beneficial and important as well. There's also exercises focused on balance or flexibility. As a general rule, you should try to incorporate various forms of exercise in your exercise program. It's not a good idea to just stick with one specific thing and that's the only thing you ever do. So if you enjoy walking, that's great, you should do that. But there's probably some other things that you can incorporate, including maybe some stretching, some strength training. We know as you get older that you do lose muscle mass. So it's important that you maybe do have a strength training regimen, and it doesn't have to be very complex, but you can get some weights and do that at home just to help keep your muscle mass there, to help keep strength, to prevent injury. That would be beneficial as you get older. Also, there's another way to quantify activities, and that can be low impact versus high impact. This is important because as you get older, maybe some of you out there have some arthritis. Low impact activity would be more of where you would want to focus on. So what are some low impact activities? Well, walking would be considered low impact. Maybe sitting on a bicycle or a recumbent bike, even an elliptical trainer. And then you even have things that are no impact like the pool. I think the pool is a great option for people that have maybe significant arthritis or other physical things that might limit some of what they can do. A pool can be very relaxing and enable people to get in some good exercise, increase the heart rate, but really take pressure off the joints if arthritis is a major concern. So then, as opposed to low impact, we have high impact activities, and the main one that we would think of would be running. And running can be something that people like to do at a young age, and maybe even as you get older, that is still something you can enjoy. But just make sure that if that's something you are attempting to do, that you have the proper equipment, good shoes, and that you're listening to your body, because maybe that can increase some of the inflammation in your body just with the high impact nature of that activity. I'd like to now go over something important, and some of you might be saying, well, I haven't really been exercising. How do I go about starting this? A lot of good resources out there, and I'll touch on this again at the very end, but the Mayo Clinic really had something that I thought that was very helpful, just some key steps and factors to consider as you think about maybe beginning an exercise program. So there's actually 5 points here that I want to briefly go over. First, you can assess your fitness level. How could you do that? Maybe you go out and walk a mile, see how long it takes you, or check your heart rate before you start the mile, and then at the end, check your heart rate again. There's other metrics you can use, like your BMI, body mass index, or even just simply measuring your waist circumference. Those are some of the ways that you can assess to kind of get a gauge of maybe where you're at physically, so you can better understand, all right, what I might be able to do to start with. Next, then, you want to look at designing a fitness program. Some things that you should consider first: what are your goals in that? Are you trying to lose weight? Are you attempting to run a race? Are you just trying to become more fit and healthy in general? It's always good to then, as you do that, have a written out plan as you start to plan this out. And you can write down your goals as well. A key concept in all this is to start slow and then slowly progress. You never want to start something new when it comes to exercise and just jump in with so much intensity that you end up injuring yourself. So it's always better to start slow, and then you can always progress gradually as your body adapts and you feel like that you're able to do the exercise. As I've already mentioned, incorporating different activities into your exercise routine is a very good idea. The idea of cross-training. If you just run or walk all the time, or maybe you bike all the time, certain muscles can become dominant and it can lead to overuse injuries as well. So it's important to consider other things like stretching, like some strength training for your upper body or lower body that can help keep your body balanced and keep it from running into injury problems as well. Another good concept is that, during our daily routines, there's ways to incorporate exercise and activity into that. You think about when we go to a grocery store, a lot of times we're always looking to park as close as we can to the store. Why not park at the edge of the parking lot and then take some time to walk in? That gives you maybe an extra minute or two of walking and exercise. Even if you'd like to take the stairs at a building instead of using the elevator. So there's different ways that you can incorporate activity into your daily routine where you're not even having to carve out specific time just for exercise purposes. And then another important concept is that we need to allow time for rest and recovery. Exercise, while it's good for our body, it does break down parts of our body, and we need to make sure that we are allowing time for recovery so we can not be having injuries develop. And this is maybe even more important as you get older. Your body might need a little bit more time to recover. Now, the third point I'd like to look at is that you need to make sure that you have the right equipment. That might include having the right shoes. Maybe you need to purchase some weights, even a bike if you would like to get into biking. One other thing you can consider is getting a fitness app. That might be a helpful tool to help you stay on track with your goals and keep track of data and different information, but that can be a great help too as well. Number 4 is you want to go ahead and get started. Keeping in mind that you do want to start slowly and then build up gradually. This allows time for your body to adapt, to minimize the chance of injury. Also, you want to listen to your body and make sure that if something does hurt, that you do stop and allow time for recovery. And if needed, you might need to seek further medical attention so you're not causing more harm there. And then lastly, number 5, monitor your progress. You could retake your initial assessment, redo that like walking the mile after maybe 4 or 6 weeks into your program. See how long it takes you to walk a mile again or where your heart rate is before and after that. You might need to set new goals. If you've already met some of the goals, you can reassess and say, hey, maybe I need to fine-tune these goals some. I'd like to take the last few minutes to very briefly just touch on a few of the benefits. Some of these you may already know about. Other ones may be new to you. One of the most important benefits of regular exercise is for your cardiovascular health. Our heart is, it's a muscle that pumps blood throughout our body. And as we exercise, our heart gets stronger, it can become more efficient. So even while we're not exercising, it can beat at lower beats per minute. And over the life of someone's I'd like to take a few minutes now and discuss some of the benefits of exercise. One of the most important ones is cardiovascularly. As we exercise, our heart becomes stronger and more efficient, enabling it to beat at less beats per minute, even while we're at rest. It can also help to lower our blood pressure as well. Heart health is very important, and we see this because so many people end up dying because of cardiovascular disease. The CDC estimates that about 650,000 people die every year from cardiovascular disease. That comes out to about one person every 37 seconds. So it's important, obviously, to keep our heart functioning well and beating strongly. Some other benefits of exercise: it can improve your cholesterol numbers, also help control weight, even prevent diabetes. And actually, it's very important in improving your immune function, which is something you might be thinking about during this time with the pandemic and all the talk about COVID-19 and other viruses and illnesses. One warning, though, is make sure that as you are exercising, you're doing it in moderation. Overtraining can actually lead to a lessening of your immune function, which can make you more susceptible to infection. Some other benefits of exercise: improved energy, better sleep as well, strengthening your muscles and bones. Also can help ease arthritis, pain, and stiffness. That's been shown in the literature that exercise is very good for arthritis pain. Also, it's been very good for mental health. Exercise has been shown to relieve stress and anxiety, even treat depression. It actually has been shown to treat depression as or more effectively than many medications that people are on for depression. Also, as you exercise, your body produces these endorphins. Endorphins are chemicals that when they go and attach to receptors in your brain, they actually give you this sense of well-being, this euphoria. Maybe if you've ever run and felt very, very good after you've run, it's called a runner's high. That's because of these endorphins that God has allowed your body to create that actually can give you this sense of well-being. Also, endorphins can reduce the perception of pain as well. That's another benefit of the endorphins. Exercise has also been shown to improve focus and concentration. It also is something that can encourage discipline too and aid in other areas of our life. So those are just a few of the benefits of exercise that you should consider, and realize that those things will be helpful to you if you are engaging in consistent exercise. A few last tips as we come to a close here. Try to find a consistent routine that is enjoyable, something that you like to do. That will enable you to be able to do this for the long term. If you are always feeling like exercise is a drudgery, then you're probably not going to be very good at sticking with a routine. You do want to set those goals and reassess them as you need to. Also remember that even a small amount of exercise is better than no exercise at all. Even if you only have time for a 10-minute walk or maybe a high-intensity training session, that would be more beneficial than not exercising at all that day. You always want to remember to keep exercise in its proper place as we consider being balanced and having the right priorities, not allowing exercise to overtake other things that are more important. And then make sure that you do take those times for rest. Your body does need rest to heal and to get stronger. That will be important as well. There's many resources online that you can look to. to help you in learning more about exercise, structuring an exercise program. I recommend that you look and go to trusted sources such as maybe the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, even Harvard Health, things like that. Those would be good places to start because you know that you will be getting a good, solid information. You don't want to really be starting with your social media and friends and just looking at what they're doing, because that might not be the right and best thing for you. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video, to listen to what I have had to say. Hopefully this has been a help to you, as now you maybe better understand how your body works, why exercise is so important, and how it can be beneficial in keeping you healthy so that your body can function well for His service. Next week, we're going to be looking at the topic of nutrition, so I hope that you'll be able to join us next week as we look at that topic. If you do have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to text or email me. I would be happy to respond and help you out in any way. Thank you again for taking the time to watch the video. I hope you have a very good rest of your week, and we will see you again next week. Take care.